Hey folks, and welcome back to the Heart of Horsemanship podcast, brought to you by Colton Woods Horsemanship. Super glad y'all joined us this week. Guys, again, my name is Colton Woods, and every single week we connect with horse lovers, enthusiasts, competitors, and professionals all across the globe with the mission of diving into the heart of horsemanship and educating horses and people with a lifetime in mind, because we believe horsemanship is not just a way to train a horse, but it's everything we do with our horses and in our own lives. That's right. This podcast is dedicated to helping fellow horse people just like you learn more about their horses and themselves. Every single episode, we want you to walk away with not just new information and a greater understanding, but also the tools and the knowledge that you can implement with your horses and in your own lives on a daily basis. So guys, here on the Heart of Horsemanship podcast, we got 4 basic principles. We're going to keep it fun, we keep it positive, we keep it informative, and we keep it real. So thanks for tuning in to the Heart of Horsemanship. And let's go ahead and dive into this week's. Now, right before we get into this topic, which is this week, we're going to be talking about relaxation, which is a prime principle in my horsemanship. And whether we're teaching at clinics or we are training our own horses here at the farm. But one of the things I wanted to do, I was feeling just kind of jazzy this afternoon when we were getting ready to do this episode. And so I just wanted to go ahead. This episode is not sponsored by anybody, but our team's really important to us. And at Spanish Silk, Hey Chicks, and a personal good friend of mine, Joan Wilcoxon from Therapeutic Options, those people have been instrumental in keeping us and our horses feeling our best, looking our best down the road. So y'all be sure to check out the Spanish Silk Grooming, all natural grooming products with Trudy Midas. Be sure to check out Hey Chicks. They're all over social media. They're killing it. Those chicks are flat killing it. And then for my local Lexington, Kentucky folks, check out Joan Wilcoxon. She from Therapeutic Options. She is a phenomenal osteopath. She has helped me with multiple horses, from personal to client horses, because it's really important. They're athletes. They need to keep feeling their best. But anyway, guys, we just like pass along what we do. So that's why I wanted to kind of give them a little plug, but we're not pimping out the podcast quite yet. So, all righty, guys. So this week, we're going to be talking about relaxation with our horses. And this is something that comes up all across the country because we ultimately need a relaxed horse for a lot of reasons. And so for me, one of the first things I tell people that relaxation isn't really one of those things that we would like to have, or it would be nice if our horses could be relaxed, or it'd be nice if we could be relaxed. But more or less, it's a requirement. And that doesn't mean that we're going to cram and jam our horse and be like, you need to be relaxed. No, it doesn't really work that way, right? Because that does just the opposite, right? Because I just did that little motion. Some of you guys that are listening on the podcast, you could hear the tightness, right? It's like, you need to be relaxed. Like my whole body stiffens up, my hands get tight, my shoulders get tight, my back gets tight, everything gets tight. And that's the opposite of what we want. So with relaxation, it's very much a requirement for our horses, which means that it's one of the very first things that we need to focus on, if not the very first thing that we need to focus on, because without it, it makes everything else more difficult, if not impossible, with our horses. And over a period of time, I kind of learned that as our horses get more focused, they get more relaxed. And that personally for me took seeing a lot of horses that were not relaxed. So they were anxious and they carried a lot of anxiety. And those same horses were the ones that were kind of running you over, or they were being extra pushy. And because I've also seen focused horses that were nervous. Like you could take a Mustang, for example, right? I've done 2 of these Mustang makeovers. I've helped multiple people with their Mustang. And a lot of times those horses, they are very focused because they are in a straight survival mode, but they are tense. And so we need to focus on how to get our horses focused so that they become relaxed. And there's a lot of layers to this that I kind of want to dive into, and there's some unconventional kind of thought process maybe that we're going to get into as far as like how we can help our horses and how far we can go to help our horses with the relaxation. And certainly some of that can be something like calling a lady like Joan that's an osteopath or a chiropractor, or ruling out all your physical ailments. Making sure they have healthy feet and they're feeling good physically. They're not compensating or they've got an injury or anything like that, because of course, that would certainly hold a horse back. But we have kind of the importance for why is it important that our horses be relaxed? And to start the bare bone basics. And first, I would divide it into a mental and a physical. You'll hear me talk about mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. For this relaxation, I'm going to kind of go mental and physical. Okay. And so for the mental side, if they're not relaxed, they're freaking miserable. Let's just be honest, right? If our horses are not being able to live a relaxed life, then they're living in a constant state of anxiety. And we might know people in our lives that way. And we might even see horses that way. And that empathetic side of us, I think, needs to try to relate to that, or to try to understand that and realize that that is kind of a horrific thing for our horses to have to live through. So from a quality of life standpoint, I actually had a horse come in that we worked with, a horse that was so mentally anxious that we started talking about some unconventional ways to try to help this horse have a better quality of life and be able to start letting down and to truly relax in the environment and in its work and everything like that. But also from a physical standpoint, guys, we're looking at riding our horses in whatever you do, trail riding, dressage, Western dressage, jumpers, hunters, whatever it is, right? It doesn't really matter. If we don't have a true mental relaxation, then our horses, one, can never perform at their true highest potential, because mental anxiety will show up in the physical. And in a very, you guys might have been the ones on the end of the lead rope. Maybe you've seen a horse that bolts out of just straight being scared, and it runs, and someone's on the end of the lead rope trying to get that thing stopped and turned around. Some of it's a lack of education, but a lot of times when things get that tight and stiff, everything else, when the mind gets that set and that anxious and that tight, it shows up in the entire body. And now when I ride my horses, a lot of times when I'm finding mental stiffness, I'm finding it in isolated areas in the horse's body. I would rather not find it in the whole body, because that means I missed precursors leading up to it. But a lot of times when a horse has a mental hang up, maybe not enough understanding of something, or maybe they're a little nervous about something, it shows up in their feet, it shows up in their ribs, their hindquarters, their neck, their head, their pole, where it shows up all over their body. And so it never really becomes about the head as it so much as about the horse's mind and the horse's body in that. So from a physical standpoint, I have even shared with folks and seen horses that almost look lame, physically lame, like would not pass a soundness exam or a vet check because they look lame. But they're so mentally anxious that they show up lame. Physically, they're not lame. Mentally, they're so wound tight that they look lame. Okay. That has happened. That's a real thing. It's not the norm, thank the Lord. I feel bad for those horses, but it does happen. So from a physical standpoint and a physical soundness standpoint, you think about this. Maybe some of you guys have been through like a haunted house, or maybe you've been like on a roller coaster, and the roller coaster didn't necessarily jar you around and no one in the haunted house grabbed a hold of you and beat you, but maybe the next day you woke up a little bit sore, or you went through something where you were very anxious. Some people have anxiety on planes, and the next day they wake up sore because your muscles are contracted for such a long period of time, or at least contracted for a period of time that they're not used to, and you wake up the next day sore. That can happen with our horses, right? If they're not relaxed and they're having to use their body and use their muscles and their tendons, it can create injury, or it can create soreness. And that's important for us to be aware of, because we're trying to develop athletes, or we're trying to do what's best for our horses when we go to ride them and work with them. And we want them to not dread going to work because they know, oh gosh, the next day I'm going to feel like hell. And that's why we put together an incremental physical plan for our horses, and we're mindful about how we develop them. And part of that physical development is the mental development with relaxation. So we've got those 2 points. And when I think about one of the first things before I get into the gray area that comes in with sometimes this relaxation concept, is that one of the most basic things that I see that can cause anxiety in our horses is a lack of leadership in the human. And so I think we might have talked about this on past podcasts. Excuse me, guys. Is that if you look at a herd of horses, if you have 4 horses and you take one horse away, say you take the lead horse away, that's the most easy example. You have 4 horses, you take the lead horse away. What happens in that field? Those other 3 horses have a community meeting and someone else takes the leadership role, and that dynamic changes. If you have a herd of 4 horses and you add a 5th horse in, that dynamic changes. Maybe that horse takes over the lead. Maybe he fits in the middle. Maybe he goes straight to the bottom of the roll, right? But a horse herd dynamic is never stagnant. It's forever changing all the time. That's why stallions in the wild, they have to fight to keep their band of mares, because there's constantly maybe another young stud ready to come in and take those mares and take over, because they can provide, maybe they're healthier and stronger, and they can provide for those mares a better safety than this other stud could. So then he could get exiled, right? But it's a very kind of natural Darwin kind of look at it. But it's the same thing with our relationship with our horses, because the natural horsemanship part of horsemanship, the only natural damn part about it is the fact of how horses think. Okay. And so we have to understand how their brain works, so that if we're working with our horses, one of the two of us is going to become the leader, because the horse needs that for its survival instinct. Because if you don't take the leadership role, your horse, by its natural instinct, has to take the leadership role in order to survive, because they're looking at you going, well, if you're not going to call the shots and kind of get us through hell and high water when it shows up, then I've got to take charge, because my survival depends on it. And you can't. And that's the only fair thing about it, because they're fight or flight, freeze, and all those things in their natural instinct, and they got to survive. You know, they want food, sex, water, friendship, and all the basics, and to survive. And so when we look at our relationship with our horses, it's there for their own mental health that we decide that we have to do what is best for our horses in each moment to provide them the leadership. And when they have proper leadership, they are truly relaxed. You can see horses out on the wild range, or even a larger herd of horses. And when they're in a sound herd where there's proper leadership and structure amongst the horses in that herd, there's horses laying down out there. There's horses sleeping, standing up with their leg cocked and their ears just cocked out to the side and their eyes nearly shut. And all of those sorts of behaviors that would truly be able to tell us that they are fully relaxed. And they are able to do that because they have a leader that is confident, that's trusting, that provides all these things for them: the safety, the leadership, the guidance, the consistency in the rules and how they're allowed to behave within the herd. All of that is very consistent, and they can find relaxation within that. They can find peace within that. And we have to provide that for our horses. So that is one of the biggest things that I see all across the board, whether it's a horse coming in for training or at clinics across the way. We've got to work on our leadership abilities in order to help our horses become more relaxed. And our horses really need us to. It's for their own mental health. And I don't necessarily want to beat that dead horse per se, because it's not always easy. It's that balance in between being the horse. You can't always be their friend. You got to be their parent. And there's times where you got to get firm on them, because they need to be allowed to explore, but not without boundaries, right? If exploration without boundaries can get them in danger, or it could get them hurt. It could get others hurt. And so all that's very important. It's kind of like raising kids, I'm going to assume a bit, because I don't have kids yet, but that building that confidence and building that inner confidence, right? It's not just the confidence within ourselves, right? We want the horse to be confident in us as a leader, but we also want to build confidence within that horse, within themselves. And a lot of that takes the ability or the willingness to let these horses explore within guidelines. And so a lot of that takes experience, and that's a whole nother conversation in itself. But bottom line is that a lot of us with our horses could take care of a lot of mental anxiety by providing leadership with our horses. And the style or whatever we need to do to provide that leadership just strictly depends on the situation with that horse. Some horses, it might just be simply hanging out with them and being present with them. Other horses, it might be doing some basic groundwork exercises to not necessarily control their energy, but to direct their energy and to give them a positive outlet to where they can be successful and learn new things and use that drive that they have. Right. So now the other thing I wanted to kind of get into is that there's a couple elements, and these are going to be all of the elements, but there's a couple elements that get into that intertwine within, they feed into it and they intertwine with relaxation. And that's the confidence and the trust is two that came to mind when we talk about relaxation with our horses. But what do I mean by how does this all intertwine? Well, we've already kind of talked about the confidence in us as a leader and the trust that they have within us as a leader, but also the confidence they have in themselves. It's not whether it's the chicken or the egg theory on, do they need confidence and trust in me first before they can be relaxed, or can they be relaxed before they get confident and trust me? Right. You guys can probably see where I'm going with that. It's not necessarily one or the other, but I really do feel like it comes down to working with the horse that you have today. Working with the horse that you have today, and that pretty much says it all, right? Does it? It's like that 4-letter word that we don't like, that starts with F and we don't like to use. It's called feel. But one of those things is it's a situational thing where we're present, we're with our horses, we are relaxed, right? Because I don't necessarily believe in the whole horse is the mirror to your soul thing. I've worked with a lot of different horses and a lot of different people, and I've had people and horses that were together for many years and they didn't mirror each other at all. And so I don't necessarily believe that to be the case, but I also believe that they will feed off of where we're at in our own mind. And that is something I've personally been diving into is, are you truly present? Are you really there? Yeah, you're relaxed, but is your mind kind of subconsciously wandering? All of those things feed into the relaxation that we get with our horses. And that relaxation comes on so many different levels. We've talked about the mental and we've talked about the physical. And a lot of times you guys will hear me say, how much can just on the last episode, we talked about, how much is allowed, like what is a fair amount to ask from our horses? And that in itself is a deep question that if you guys didn't catch, you need to go back and listen to, because there's a lot that goes into evaluating, what is a fair amount that we can ask from our horses. And that all depends on that particular situation. And so a lot of the things that we have to work on, how I would work with a horse to get trust and respect and confidence between me and the horse and within the horse would be different if I just had maybe a domestically raised horse versus a completely feral Mustang that's never hardly been caught, maybe never been caught and just kind of corralled with humans or corralled, like run through chutes and stuff like that. Those two ways we might have to do some different strategies because those horses have different experiences. And so one of the things that we have to think about when we're developing this relaxation in our horses is that it kind of comes in phases. And in the most basic sense, it's a mindset first. When we talk about the foundation work with our horses, is that the foundation, when I say we're putting strong foundations on horses, that there's a limit into what the foundation is. The foundation it is the building blocks for everything that is to come, but the foundation isn't everything. Okay. There are things past the foundation that our horses will accomplish and that we can accomplish with our horses, but we do need a strong foundation. And one of the biggest elements of that strong foundation is a good working mindset in a horse, to where they're relaxed, they're willing, they understand, and they are in a learning frame of mind. And in order for them to be in a truly good frame of mind and a truly learning frame of mind and a working mindset, they need to be relaxed. All right. And so that is a huge part of the foundation, and why I believe that you can't go on without it, because if you do, there's going to be a lot of other troubles that we've already talked about, from physical and mental anxieties and stiffnesses and lack of suppleness and lamenesses that could come from a lack of them being relaxed. And so we have to keep that in mind. And then there's other times where we work on a mental relaxation in other instances, such as a horse that might get worried from an outside stimulus. I was on a colt this morning, And I was the only one there riding, and outside a guy fired his truck up, and it's been cold. So of course it was just like, and he started it up, and I knew where the guy was outside. So kind of had a feeling it happened. So I just positioned the horse to where when it happened, he was able to move his feet, and he felt like he can move his feet. And when he knew he could move his feet, he only went 2 or 3 strides, and then he kind of stopped, and his ears started going left and right, and then he relaxed down. He's like, oh, okay, it didn't get me. And that horse was notorious for kind of grabbing ass and running when things like that happen. So it was a good opportunity to work with a horse like that. But outside stimuluses and speed are 2 ways that horses will go from a relaxed state to a more of an anxious state. And that's where we have to work with them on the influence we have with them. And so if that's on the ground, it's having the proper exercises and the techniques and the approach to be able to get their focus back on us. Same thing. It's the same thing under saddle, is that we can pick up on an inside rein and bend them and bring them back to a slower gait, or bend them almost to the point to where they relax, and we just wait on them. And we're just like, hey buddy, you're all right. We'll sit here as long as it takes for you to relax. And you guys can tell, like the tone of my voice, hey buddy, we'll sit here as long as it takes for you to relax. There's no rush in it, because you can't rush the relaxation. But my friend Patrick King, he says you can't pull softness into them. Well, what is softness in the mental state? It's relaxation. And then softness comes from a mentally relaxed horse. So if we can't pull softness into them, and we can't rush them getting relaxed, then we have to be patient. And that patience will build that confidence. It'll build that trust. And it'll ultimately build that foundation that we need to have with every one of our horses that'll serve them the rest of their lifetime. And so once we have that, in the most basic instances, we don't overface our horses. We build up. We work with them from where they're at. We don't put them into situations they're not prepared for. But we always prepare them for the unexpected as best we can. So, I've taken a lot of anxious horses, and sometimes it's a lot of groundwork and it's a lot of walk work. And then when you go to the trot, you don't expect as much of them from at the trot as maybe they're capable of the walk, because that speed can elicit emotion. And you keep that same mentality of, hey buddy, I'm just here to help you. When I pick up on this rein, the conversation I was having with a client this morning was that the horse had anytime he felt something touch him, he would kind of really tense up. I mean, his whole body would go tense. And so I had to really work with this horse, because he would be okay standing still, but if he was moving and he was being touched with a flag or the end of a lunge whip or the end of the lead rope, and I would just let him travel around in the circle and toss that on him, he would get so tight, and physically tight, but mentally he would get wound tight. And then if you didn't remove that pressure, it could turn into him running around. And he was apparently, I wish I had video of it, because it would have been a good before and after, but apparently before he came, he would just run blind. He'd run off. He'd get so worried that and it was very, very dangerous. We don't have it on video. They didn't have anything on video before that, but that was what he was doing before he got to us. And so it's been one of those things where I said, hey, that for me, that's a really big problem, because my rein is going to make contact with his face, and my leg is going to make contact with his side. And my philosophy on that is that is to help him stay relaxed. And then later on, it'll be to help him be able to use himself properly and to be able to do these higher level maneuvers, because he's a super nice horse. But early on, the philosophy needs to be, he needs to understand that is there to help him. It's there to help him stay relaxed. And that's mental and physically. And so sometimes we can do things to help a horse figure something out, or even in figuring out might be how to become relaxed by moving the horse's feet. Or we work with the mind to get to the feet, right? We work with the feet to get to the mind, or we work with the mind to get to the feet. And either way, we could do that with the concept of looking for relaxation. And we can get focus out of that. And when they're more focused, they stay more relaxed. And that was exactly what was happening this morning, is that I rode that horse fairly actively. We weren't doing anything fast. We did a little bit of trot work, which was the first trot work we did, but we did a lot of walk work, a lot of changes of direction, and focus on my seat, focus on my legs. Sometimes getting a little careless with everything and like, rub him back, move the latigo straps on the saddle, do all these sorts of things so that he becomes very focused on what is important to him in that moment. And then when something like the truck fires up, he has the freedom to move his feet so he doesn't feel claustrophobic, but also I stay relaxed with him. And then he understands that he just needs to stay focused on what we're doing together, and anything outside of there that happens outside of us isn't necessarily a big deal, because if it becomes a big deal or if something that's happening around us and we need to act on it, I can make that decision because I can build the trust in him and the confidence in him to look to me for the answer before he feels like he has to go straight to his self-preservation instincts to save himself. But with that being said, a very important principle that Tom would teach, with Tom Dorrance teach, that I kind of got out of that True Unity book, was that you don't take away that self-preservation. That's a large part of what possibly could lead into the spiritual side of that horse. And you don't want to take that away from the horse, because that is the root of what the horse is. And so rather than try to take out the self-preservation instincts in a horse, we can work with it in a way, and this is going to sound contrary, but I'm going to reference another horseman that shared a quote that has truly fundamentally changed the way I think of things. And it's, when you change the way you look at things and things, you look at change, something that Warwick Schiller shared. And when we look at the self-preservation instincts, such as kicking, biting, rearing, running away, whatever the case may be, rather than try to take that out of the horse, we can work with that to our advantage by understanding why a horse feels like they have to do what they're doing, which might be running away, for example. And why is the horse feeling that way? And leading with a little bit of empathy in that instance will certainly help us develop a plan on how we can help that horse do that. It's almost like we're not like an equine psychologist, but a therapist, right? We're not there to take over, but we're there to help direct that horse in a direction that is going to be more beneficial, more positive in that horse's life. And so how can we take something like this horse running away? He gets super mentally anxious, and he's no longer relaxed, and it shows up in his feet because he scoots forward, right? And this horse has been very, very prepared on the ground, and we're just incrementally stepping things up, but trying to only change like one thing at a time, not overloading him, but also not avoiding potential trouble necessarily, right? We want to keep them on just the right side of trouble, as far as in that meaning, we don't want to get them into trouble. But if we see a spot in our horses that needs to be worked on, that might not be the easiest to work through, then we have to make the decision. Are we prepared? Are we capable of working our horse through that? Because that is a crucial moment in our horse's learning, where they're going to learn how things are. And that happens in all sorts of instances, from being how you handle horses on the ground to how when you ride them. And if you feel overfaced, you feel like you don't have the skill sets, then you lean on someone that does and that can help you with that. And then otherwise, when you're in that situation, you say, hey, well, I'm not going to avoid this situation because this could get potentially dangerous, such as a horse running you over. We're going to work on this, and we're going to get this sorted out. And we're going to say, hey, this is kind of my space. I'm here to help you. You don't have to run over me. And I can direct you where your feet's going to go. And you can trust me that I'm going to lead you in a direction where you're going to stay safe, or whatever the case may be. Right. But we do have to go head on at those points of resistance, or those points of anxiety, or wherever they may be coming from, because our horse is constantly learning and taking in information and putting together these neuron pathways in their brain of how they're going to think, and this whole network on, well, if this happens and this happens, then I'm going to do this, and I respond in this or react in this way. And we can be strategic in how we develop our horses to have a very solid working mindset that is built on relaxation, so that it gets to the point to where I can take my horse to a new environment, and I have worked with them and tried to explain to them. And I consciously think, when I work with my horses, when I pick up on this rein, or I put this foot on your side, it is to help you stay relaxed and to stay with me. And it's not to get you nervous and anxious. And it's not to get you distracted or to do anything negative. It is to help you stay with me, help you stay focused, and help you find the answer to what I'm asking, help you find the answer to the question that I'm asking you. And when they get into this mindset where you really try to start to become one per se, when you go to these new environments and they're a little bit looky or they're a little bit distracted and they're not just 100% there with you, and you go back to those basics of when you pick up on an inside rein or put a leg on, or even just talk to them, that they start to focus in on back on you, then that's when you really start to click and you start to develop that partnership. But the relaxation is a very deep subject, and I didn't even quite see going on quite this long about it, but it's the crux of the very beginnings of everything that we have to have. And so, without it, I think you have to spend the time on it. Otherwise it will set limitations to how good our horses can get. And so I have another horse in training that I was playing around with something this morning, because a lot of times when we talk about getting relaxation, we start getting relaxation when our horses are standing still. All right. That could be they're at liberty in the round pen, so they're loose in the round pen. That could be on the end of the halter rope. And so often, if we have good timing and we're working with the horses and acknowledging when they do things good, and after we put pressure on, they respond appropriately, and we stop and we give them that rest, right? And they might stand there, they might lick and chew, they might sigh, do a big deep exhale, they might bat their eyes really heavily, they might do all those signs and shake their head, and that usually kind of goes along with a sigh, but sometimes they'll just shake their head and drop their head further to the ground, and they start doing all these signs of relaxation. And that's very important, because we have to be able to get that usually at a standstill with them, and particularly at a standstill on the ground with them. And one of the things that I'm chasing in my horsemanship is that I have been chasing for a long time, but I have a horse in training right now that is holding back a little bit. And so it's been a focal point, and that's that he gets a huge release when all the pressure's taken off and he's doing nothing. So he comes to a complete standstill, whether that's riding him or on the ground. And I personally want to be able to have my horses truly relax and lick and chew, sigh, and do all these things, all these signs of relaxation, and to where you can truly feel it through their body while they're moving their feet. Okay. And some horses catch on to this easier than others, but it can be a difficult thing to chase up when you have a horse that's holding back. So I have a horse I've been riding him in the hackamore for about 90 days or so. And occasionally I can kind of I can feel it when I'm riding him around through his body and how he's moving. But also if I make a turn, I can kind of look at his nose, and he's kind of got that goldfish look where he's got his lips sucked in just a little bit. And so I've been trying to work with him on relaxing while he's going through his work. And I've been using several different approaches, like going until you relax into this. That doesn't mean we go for hours and hours and hours, but it means that we're going to keep doing exactly what we're doing at the same steady pace until you get confident and relaxed in this. And that has worked fairly well. But this horse is going to be maybe like a Western dressage horse. He might do some regular dressage. And also we're talking about doing some of the ranch horse events with him. And so this morning I actually put a ride on him in the 2-rein. So I put the Beaujolais on him, and he was packing the spade bit for the first time. And when I did that, I didn't do it for this reason necessarily. I did it because I was going to ride him in the 2-rein, and I wanted him to start to get the experience in carrying this 2-rein and carrying that spade around. And of course I wasn't picking up on the reins or anything. I actually had the Romel's dallied off to my saddle horn, and I was just riding off the hair reins to the Beaujolais. But I've found a lot of times that a lot of horses that I've put in that spade, they love that spade. It's got a cricket in it, and the cricket's just a copper roller. And that copper roller is like giving your horse a megaphone. When they roll that nice and softly, you can tell they're super relaxed. When they roll that cricket and grind it, you can tell that they are super anxious. Okay. And so it was like giving him a bit of a megaphone to talk to me. And it was really neat because also he's been riding a hackamore, so he hasn't had anything in his mouth to stimulate his mouth to work. And so this spade gave him something to maneuver around in his mouth with the copper roller to roll. And I'm going to play around with it to see if we can actually utilize that as a way to then stimulate our horses to further relax. Now, my buddy Patrick King, reference him again because he's a good friend and he's got a lot of great information out there. He talks about jaw releases a lot of times that we do with our horses on the ground. Him and I briefly talked about also different bits and ones that will keep a horse maybe a little softer in the mouth or a little more relaxed in the mouth. Some bits that are made out of certain materials and everything. And I've always liked the 3-piece snaffle. I've always liked the 3-piece snaffle with a roller in it because I also because I've liked the benefits that my bridle bits have that all have rollers in them. And so I like a snaffle that has like a French link snaffle with a roller in the middle of it. And I found that helps horses stay relaxed. So I'm gonna play around personally with this horse to see if I can actually use my training aid, which would be my bridle bit, which he's just gonna be packing. I'm not gonna be utilizing it as far as picking up on it and teaching him how to operate off of it. I need him to build his confidence in carrying that bit first. But that bit has a lot of opportunity, I do feel like, to help him further become relaxed in the mouth. And so that's something I'm playing with, but the relaxation while your horses are moving is something that we certainly want to be able to achieve, to where if you're in the trot work, you're in the canter work, and you feel the horse get a little tight, maybe they suck in a little more air and they hold on to it, they don't fully exhale, that we can put a leg on or adjust our reins a little bit and say, hey, you're good. You can relax with me here. We can work on this. And then you can feel them just kind of melt like butter into what you're working on. We want to be able to get that while we're moving, not just when they come to a complete standstill. And that's something that I've been working on with this particular horse. But guys, when it comes to relaxation, I'll go ahead and kind of put this in a whole summary here, is that it's the foundation. It is the foundation of the foundation, and that we absolutely have to have relaxation as a requirement in our work. And that if we're working with our horses and they seem super relaxed, and then we do something with them and it increases their anxiety level, and it to a point where your horses will reach a point to where if they become so anxious, they can't possibly learn anything because they're so concerned about surviving or whatever the case may be, that they are not going to retain the lesson. So by being able to work with our horses in a way where they can stay relaxed and they can stay in a good working mindset, our lessons will carry over more and more. And that doesn't mean that it always has to be easy peasy for the horses, right? Because we have to push on our horses a bit. We have to work with them and elevate their calling to what we're going to ask them to do. And there's days where we have to go to the gym or we have to go to work, and it really takes a lot of mental focus and it takes a lot of physical strength. But then at the end of the day, we don't have to do that every day. And everything's more versatile. It comes into cross training, keeping things fresh mentally and physically. And we really need to have a dynamic thought process into how we can develop our horses. But when we run into a spot where we find our horses getting anxious, it's so important that we try to recognize that. And then we approach that from an empathetic standpoint where we say, hey, partner, I hear you. I feel that. And so I'm going to help you get through that here. And then you do what you deem best to do, and you do the absolutely best you can do to coach your horse through that. And because anytime they do really believe in anxiety, it's such a great opportunity to build that confidence and trust in you from them. And you can use that to build their own confidence in themselves, because we need them to have that. The one thing that I find is a lot of times people find that their horses get relaxed at home. And horses that get relaxed at home a lot of times are not confident and trusting all the time in their rider or even in themselves, but they are confident and trusting and relaxed in their own environment. And then when they go to a new place, the new environment isn't the same. So all the baggage shows up, and the cards get exposed, and the fact that they weren't actually confident in themselves. They weren't actually confident with their rider, but they were comfortable in their environment. And so we have to make sure that we are working with our horses when we stay at home for a while with our horses, that we're changing things up, and that we're making sure that they are truly with us and it's not just a product. Their relaxation is not necessarily a product of just the environment. And it's important too to get your horses out and haul them to new places when you can, because that will certainly help build that relaxation, that confidence, that trust in you, the overall experience of being a well-rounded, versatile horse. And so, guys, this is important from a mental standpoint. It's important from a physical standpoint. It's important from an emotional standpoint, and it's important from a spiritual standpoint for our horses. All four pillars affected by the one concept of relaxation with our horses. So, guys, I want to go ahead and wrap things up. I want to say thank you, and I appreciate each one of you guys tuning in to the Heart of Horsemanship podcast every single week. We do our best to bring you guys as much value as we can. I'm a podcast junkie myself, so I definitely enjoy listening to content down the road. But you can also catch these episodes on our YouTube channel as we upload all of our videos there as well from the podcast. And if you guys have any recommendations for topics that you would like to hear us discuss on the Heart of Horsemanship podcast, or if you have guests that you would like to have us interview here on the podcast, we are always open to suggestions. We love having guests on here. It's a great way for us to be able to connect with other horsemen and women in all sorts of disciplines, whether that's in the breeding side of the business, to the training, to whatever the case may be. We are absolutely open because we want to bring you guys the best value possible and the most value possible to help you and your horses along your journey. So anyway, guys, we wish you a blessed day, and thank you for listening to the Heart of Horsemanship podcast. Y'all take care.